Hey, it's Darren with Arbitrage Trade. It is time for Deep Dive with Daniel. And the title of this week's blog is The Mirage of Growth When Everything Rises Except Your Purchasing Power. And here, I've got my wallet here as a prop. And see, there's nothing. There's nothing in there. I got receipts from where I spent it, but I got nothing in there. Now, I do know that everything's digital, so that might be an excuse. But no, I can tell you, I'm feeling the pain of what you are talking about in this blog, and I'm sure 90% of us out here are feeling this pain if we go by the stats that we've all talked about on After the Bell, etc. So let's jump into it. So, what do you mean by the mirage? What is this illusion of prosperity? Why are some people feeling it and some aren't? I guess.
Yeah, it's everyone thinks it's like, oh, like, you get a raise, like your stocks appreciate, your home value appreciates. And there is some truth to that, depending on how you look at the numbers, but there's your nominal and then there's your real, right? So when you think about, your nominal home value, you know, since COVID, home values have gone up, what, like 30 to 50%.
Yep.
But when you look at real, and that's assuming you believe the inflation numbers, real adjusts for that nominal change minus the inflation change. So it shows you how far you are ahead, really. And normally, when you look at those numbers, if you were to get a true gauge on inflation, which we'll talk about why those numbers aren't real, like in the sense that they're like literally just not real, is that normally you actually are never ahead of inflation. And at best, you're treading water and keeping up.
Yeah, so you're looking at you have to everything has to be in the variable, right, to give you the equation answer. And so what you're saying, if you put all these variables in, that even though the consumers being resilient right now, as they love to say, we are struggling, and it looks like the U.S. is doing just grandioso. But technically, a lot of us are struggling. So we look at the news and we go, hey, look at the stock market, look at all this thing, look at all the house values are at record highs, and average cost is like 450,000, et cetera. So as a whole, the country must be doing great. But inflation can definitely kill that. So as you put it, inflation is a silent tax. So how does that take away from the dollar value? Because it's all about the dollar, right? I mean, that's basically where we're coming around, is this is all about the dollar. So your dollar is either weak or strong. Your dollar, the one that you're using from your end of the
Mhm.
dollar. So yeah, you can go ahead and expand on that.
Yeah, so I think this is an example that everyone can relate to. Is that I think it was Wendy's. When I was in college, so that would have been a number of years ago now, like almost 8 years ago, let's say 7 years
You
ago.
youngster.
You
Okay, go ahead.
you could go to Wendy's and you could get the 4 for 4, right?
Hmm.
So I never really ate at Wendy's, but it was like you could get like two hamburgers, a fry, and a drink, and it'd be like $4, right? Four
Hey,
things
that's
for
a
four
date.
bucks,
That's a date if you share the drink and the fry. Go ahead.
right? Like, and what was it that it was this summer or last summer that Coke had to subsidize the deal at McDonald's to make a value meal that was less than $10, right? So just
Yep.
there, you have 2.5 times increase in the price of a similar meal over the course of, let's call it, 8 years,
Yep.
right? So that's the silent tax, right? And if you were
Mhm.
to look at wage growth from that time, I guarantee you wage growth is not up 2.5 times. That person 8 years ago that was making $100,000 is now most likely not making $250,000, right? If they were to have the same job, right? Promotions and all that kind of stuff, sure. But if you all things held constant, you're not up 250% like the meal is. And so that's the silent tax of inflation eroding away the value of your dollar while you're not getting more dollars.
Well, here's the deal, and this is something I think a lot of people misunderstand. Is if you go back and you can Google this, but or Chat GBT it now. I don't know if that's a verb too now, but you can look at a historical month by month inflation chart. So inflation was up 3% this month. Inflation was up 5% this past month, or even go back to where I mean, we got up to 9%. Again, if these numbers are true, but you can look at that inflation and see that if you do a total of all that, it's like, okay, so inflation went up 3% last month. My job didn't give me 3% more. So if you look at that through it's an accumulation thing, and people don't realize that. They think, okay, it only went up 3%. That's all it went up last month. That means for 2 months it's only gone up 3%. No, it's gone up 6%. You have to keep adding those on. Prices keep rising, and that's why they look at this thing like a CPI, these indexes that are what are the prices now? What do they keep moving up? So I think that can open somebody's eye when they see it's an accumulative thing. So it's like, oh, we got it down under 3% this month. Well, yeah, but go ahead and add the other months, and you're up to like 15% this year. I mean, it's. I think that people don't understand that, and there's no way that your wages keep up with that.
And one of the sadder things that they do to skew these numbers, and it is the government that does this, is that they've changed over time of what gets included in the inflation index, right? So, for example, what is it? Core CPI, the number that the Fed uses to adjust rates and whatnot,
Which they're
is
actually going to bring out Friday. So,
which
which would be today.
does
Yeah,
not include um, housing and energy
houses. Yeah,
costs,
yeah, yeah.
right? So you're telling me something that I try to never spend more than a quarter of my paycheck on when I look at trying to get my rent,
Hmm.
right? Most Americans are higher than that. It's like a third to half often, is not included in the inflation, right? That and energy, so buying gas for your car, like the electric for your home, all that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So you have to think about that. How does that infect inflation protected securities, right? So there's called TIPS. They're inflation protected bonds, right? So you buy a bond, the rate's supposed to keep you up with inflation, so your money stays even on balance. But that number is based on a not true number of inflation. It's like COVID inflation was really bad, right? What do they say? It was 20%. But if you look at people who kind of actually back end the math, it was 37%,
Yes.
which is much closer to the reality of how much money they printed at the time. And so it's really kind of like this lie that the government tells us to make us not feel like, no, you're wrong. Like inflation's not that bad. It's this number
Yep.
where,
Yep.
our wallets feel it in an entirely different way. And
Hmm.
I didn't include this in the blog because I didn't want to make it so political, but like Obama was actually one of the worst offenders with this to make Obamacare like an affordable thing. They changed about how inflation was so that they didn't have to pay out as much Social Security, right? Because
Yep.
Social Security is adjusted based on inflation. So they
Yep.
changed the way the number was done so they could take more money for Obamacare. And it's just one of these like things that is just like, oh, like you guys don't care at all about how it affects people, right? You just want the number to be what the number is so you can do what you want.
It's the old COLA, the cost of living adjustment, and yeah, any way they can play with that, they will. To a either not give out as much money, or b to make it look like things are much better than they are, and it is much better, but not for most of us. We're down here struggling, and while the top 10% are like expanding and doing much better. You said there's a debasement trade, and you're kind of talking about this with the housing, but you're saying that assets tend to have more value. So we kind of talked about this at the very beginning. Is there anything you want to add to that? Because you're talking about gold too, I think.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, just the debasement trade is has been lately that gold has gone up in value, right? Because worries
Hmm.
about inflation of like the U.S. dollar and its
Record
debasement,
levels,
right? And
yes,
them
yes.
printing more money. And so you just like you have to think of when I have in here your parents' home was worth $80,000 when they bought it, and now it's worth $800,000 today. But in reality, unless you live in New York, LA, Chicago, a place where real estate value does truly always appreciate, um, that home actually isn't worth that delta of $720,000 more. It's just their dollar is worth that percentage, 8 times less. Um,
Exactly,
so
exactly.
you can think of it as like, oh, my home value has appreciated, gold has appreciated over time. It's like, no, your dollar just buys less of that good.
Which is good if you're moving from a high cost of living area to a lower cost, which is like people that move here to Tennessee from California. Then that eight hundred
Yeah, I mean,
thousand
if you
dollar
if you
home
go
that you
from
sold.
your $1 million LA home to Puerto Rico, like sure, yeah,
There you
now
go.
you're crushing
Exactly.
it. But but other than that, like it's not quite how it works.
100%, 100%. But I'm just saying that's why you see a lot of these companies moving to Texas or moving somewhere to
So
Tennessee, even because it helps that exchange here you're talking about, the debasement. It helps that whole thing to save some value in the companies. So you gave a quote from Warren Buffett. He said, "If you own productive assets, inflation may hurt you in terms of the purchasing power of your cash flows, but it will not destroy you. What destroys you is holding money." So this is like you can try to save money, I guess, and not put it to work, and you're trying to keep up with what's going on, and you're only going to lose if you don't put that into something that's making money, because it will always keep going up. The
the
assets will
the
keep going
the
up, and
way I
your
like
cash
to think,
means nothing.
yeah,
Yeah,
the way I like to think about this is like if you buy gold, the value is different if you buy it in US dollars versus Chinese renminbi, right?
yeah,
It's relative to the value of that currency.
yep,
But if you price, all things considered, that let's say Microsoft is priced accordingly, right? It's like at its perfect value. Its value doesn't change whether it's in US dollars or renminbi, right? The underlying denomination does, but it's like
right.
Microsoft is a productive asset that throws off cash, right?
Hmm.
End of the day, it will be valued appropriately regardless of the underlying currency. But you
Yep,
can't say the same for gold. You can't really say the same for your house. It kind of changes. So
yep,
what Buffett
yep.
here is saying is that owning a productive asset is good where however it's valued. Where things like gold or a house that cost you money to hold, or just holding cash, not the same.
Nope, nope. You got to put your cash to work. So um, you actually said that inflation's good here. I need to play my boo button. Boo. But you said that inflation actually is I guess a necessary evil, if you will,
Yeah, the way money works is that it's a credit system. It needs to expand, right? So you
especially in the
put
U.S.
your
Yeah.
yep. I mean everywhere, right? Any sovereign country that produces their own currency
Hmm.
and controls it, that's the only way you grow, right? You have to produce more of it. It has to be put to work. And as a result, if you place your money right, you get to benefit from that, right? So hold money in the stock market. All you got to do is buy the S&P, and that is something that can outpace inflation, right? Real estate potentially on the area. Gold is better to hold than just cash in a bank account. But you do have to be cautious of where you hold these things and for how long, as they're not all created equal over the same long term.
Yeah, definitely. Keep looking at what you own and what your assets are, and you may have to move them in and out of certain things to just keep up with what's happening worldwide. Um, and you gave, let's see, four things um, to protect yourself: own productive assets. You said stocks, businesses, or anything that generates cash flow. Avoid idle cash, which is what we just talked about. Hold hard assets wisely, and that's where you have to keep your eye on it and
Mm-hmm.
change if something looks like it's happening in the real estate market, then change, and then you can always jump back in later when you hit that same part of the curve, if you will, with real estate. And then you said, and I think we're going to have a lot of this because of AI. You're going to have to learn to trade maybe and try to do something different so that you're making more money at your job, which you can have more money to invest. So investing in yourself so that you can have those skills to maybe learn about AI,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I mean, you got to be flexible.
Yeah, yeah. I think the debasement trade of the U.S. is on. it just is what it is, right? It's just the
Yep.
way the system works. I think we saw that Elon was asked nicely to leave Doge, more or less, right? So you're
Yep.
talking about a man that knows how to navigate a company through bankruptcy. In this case, America, right? So you're asking the one man in America that can probably turn the ship, who probably showed them the numbers and go, this ain't freaking happening, right? And so what does it mean if we can't turn the ship as far as reducing costs? They're going to try to inflate away the debt. What happens when you inflate away the debt? These assets are either have real value and they're going to rise, or that you're going to get crushed by holding the dollar. So
Yep.
those are really kind of like the two options you have. And I hope for anyone listening or reading this, they've realized that you got to own the productive assets, or at least at minimum, have it in a real asset that can hold some kind of value. If in theory you were to change it to another currency, right? That's the way to think about how to play this.
Yeah, I remember not long after coming to arbitrage trade, it was something Roy said over and over again. It's all about the dollar. It's the dollar bill, y'all.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the value of it and what we need to do based on the value of it, and how it can make us feel like we're really wealthy, or it can make us feel like we're struggling. And I think that's where we are right now. And you can do the last quote at the bottom.
Yeah. So the dollar is the mirror, and inflation is the fog that hides what's real.
Yep. Yep. Inflation is the smoke screen,
Yeah.
if you will. So this definitely is real world as we watch the dollar trying to recover, if you will, to 98, and we know that and try to get back up over 100, but Dixie, that is. And I know Royce was saying it could push up to 116 here not too long from now. So we'll have to see within the next year. So that could be exciting. And then we'll see what the debasement trade looks like then. And if more people are happy at that point
Mm-hmm.
than what the media is saying are, because we're all resilient. Yay, team.
Yep.
All right, appreciate the deep dive. Just looking past, and that's what we have to do, because the media won't do this. They won't dig down deeper than the surface level, or whatever they're trying to accomplish at that point.
They want to sell you the FUD, the fear,
That's it.
uncertainty, and doubt.
That's it. They want to be the theme park from the outside looking in, and then when you get in and you see all the throw up everywhere. Never mind. I'm not going to be that way. I'm thinking of theme park Sims or whatever it was. But yeah, appreciate that. Look forward to see what you're going to do next week. What you're going to dive deep into next week on Deep Dive with Daniel. Bye, Daniel.
See you, Darren.